part of every student's life involves working and talking with other people. But we all know that isn't a bed of roses. We might encounter challenges along the way and even toxic teammates.
Do you have teammates who are slackers, know-it-alls, lone wolves? Did names come to your mind? Are you sure that you're not one of them? Here in this episode, we'll be talking about how to deal with toxic teammates instead of ignoring them. And I think that will make a big difference to your group or organization. This is JR.
And I'm Aaron, and this is Ain't a Boss, the only leadership podcast for highly stressed out students. Alright, welcome back to another episode of Ain't a Boss. This is actually episode 10. Good to be here. Hello, JR. Welcome
Hey,
back.
Aaron. Good to see you again.
Alright. And actually, as I mentioned earlier, this episode is our 10th, and it's actually titled Dealing with Toxic Teammates. And can I just say, JR, it took me back to war flashbacks. Gave me war flashbacks just looking at this topic.
Yep.
You know, a couple of years back, here's the tea, just why I was thinking about that. A couple of years back, I had this experience in an organization. You were preparing for the flagship event of one of the satellite events of the flagship event of our organization. I was assigned, me and my partner were assigned to contact and be liaisons to different schools, attendees.
Yeah.
And in the middle of that, let's just say in the middle of our work, I was the only one who was able to, garner attendees or actually seal deals with people. And it came to my mind. I was thinking, what could be wrong with, it could be happening on the other side, since I didn't really know what was going on. And long
that must
story
be very
short,
stressful for you.
it was very stressful. Although we were able to resolve it in the end, but at that specific point in time, I was already thinking, hey, is it something wrong with me? Is it something wrong with what I'm doing? Or,
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe, perhaps. But I would definitely say that was a really that produced some toxicity in the work environment. The lack of communication, a lack of progress updates as well. So I feel like just drawing from that experience, this is a really, really relevant topic. I just want to nuance that partner of mine is a very good guy. I'm glad that we were able to talk it out. But at that point, I wouldn't deny as well. It felt really stressful for me. And for my
Whoever
teammates
you
too.
are, you were judged as a toxic teammate. No, I'm kidding. joke.
Well, you are. Yeah. But anyways, just goes to show how impactful talking about or understanding toxic teammates are. And I'm glad that we're actually going to be able to discuss that, share our thoughts into that right away. But just to give a brief insight into why this is such an impact, or how this creates such a big impact. First of all, this is something we deal on a regular basis as students, as student leaders. It's something real.
Yep.
And it has consequences. Not being able to deal with it creates lots of consequences. Just want to highlight this by sharing a study. It's from Harvard Business Review. So we've used that a couple of times. And just to really highlight the impact here, it says that in the workplace, just in a workplace setup, 80% of employees lost work time worrying about the offending employee's rudeness. 78% said their commitment to the organization declined in the face of toxic behavior. 66% said their performance declined. And 63%, around 5 out of 8, lost work time in avoiding the offender. So, just to see, this is in the corporate setup where people might not be friends or, are bound by company goals and company culture.
Yeah.
And it's even more amplified when it comes to the group work, when it comes to student organizations where you're probably working with friends, working with people you care about genuinely.
Yeah.
So, I cannot understate the fact how large of an impact this can create. Yeah.
Yeah, to think that you had war flashbacks, that could really say, that could really tell you that it had a big impact on you. But I think it will be good for us later on. We're going to be talking about like, okay, is it really a toxic teammate or toxic behavior or just maybe like
Right.
one instance? We'll deal with that later. But whatever that is, it really makes a big difference if we're not able to handle those kinds of situations. So,
And
yeah.
I think the first
not to
step.
mention,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I was saying not to mention that the Harvard Business Review report, it talks about the productivity lang ha. Like that
Right.
must cost a lot if people actually don't handle that, and then that's translated to kaching kaching. But it's much more relatable for us when we see the impact on relationships, friendships, or
Mental
even
health.
like exactly.
Well-being. Yeah. Yeah. And I guess, JR, the first step to understanding, toxic teammates and how we deal with that is by actually identifying how this transpires or materializes. What kind of toxic teammate are you? The same study from Harvard Business Review actually discusses 6 main types of toxic workmates, but in our context, we'll just say toxic teammates. So the first one is the slacker.
Wait, before you say that,
Right.
can I just say, when I saw the list, I was like, oh my gosh, like, are these all me?
And it happens. No.
Yeah, it happens. Of course, one or two, or I mean, most of those things we might experience every now and then, but there will
Right.
be one dominant thing. Later on, I'm gonna say more about that, just the new ones, these traits. But yeah, I didn't want to look at it, but anyways.
All right.
Yeah, face
ready.
our fears.
Let's get ready. So you're ready to go into the 6. So
Yes.
the first one is called the slacker. Yeah, we're starting off really big word right here. So can you say something about this, Jer?
Yeah. So basically, keywords: procrastination and excuses. So yeah, you don't show up right away, or you put off the work, and then you just come up with a lot of reasons why you're not able to do it.
Lots of I think this is really commonplace in group setups, group works involving papers, doing reports. More so when the deadline's far away. People don't do it. They don't they communicate, but they don't do the work in actuality. So that leaves the members guessing: should we take this responsibility? The responsibilities are being passed on from that member to the member for the sake of progress, for the sake of getting work done. So
yung isang groupmate would end up tagahawak na lang ng Manila papers sa report kasi wala na.
or in the
Wala na
virtual
ibang
case,
magawa.
in the virtual scenario, just making the G-docs or passing the email
Right.
on that end. So it's a slacker, number 1. Number 2 is called, and this might bring some war flashbacks also. It's called the bully. Oh wow. And so what's the bully?
So basically this is intimidation and power play. So most likely it will be the head of the organization, but there are also strong personalities in your group that either paparinigan ka na wala ka masyadong inaambag, or would intimidate you with words or with stares that would basically ending up doing a lot more work than you're supposed to. And then the bully ends up not doing a lot of things because he's such a bully.
Let me just tell you, Jer, that doesn't just happen with org leaders. So
oh, for sure,
right
yes.
there, yeah, for sure. I resonate a lot with that. But it's something we'll also tackle later on. We'll figure out how to deal with that later.
Yeah.
We're moving to number 3, and I guess you'd find this a bit amusing. I don't know why. You might just find this amusing. It's called the gossip.
Me or you?
Both of us. Okay. All about that drama.
Are you accusing me?
I'm not. You said so yourself that you might have, experienced 1 or 2 or everything.
Okay. So are you saying this is one of them? I'm kidding.
I don't know. Probably. Just kidding.
Inside joke. We just love a lot of like cheat time, but they're not necessarily gossips.
For sure. But
Aaron
speaking
and
of
I.
the gossip, third type of toxic.
Yes. Right. So basically, it's all about drama that's diverting the problem, which is you not being able to do what you're supposed to do. But instead of talking about you and your lack, you talk about other people, and their personal lives. And then that leads to inefficient work and not being productive. So yeah.
Yeah. Not just undermining, the perhaps the person you're talking about, but also what the group is bringing, or the entire group, or the entire organization at that. So, the gossip.
Yeah. So for example, like in a group that's instead of you saying like, yeah, I got a lot of like difficulty doing our
Right.
project, then you talk about like the love story or the 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 quarrel of these like teammates who are together.
Right.
Yeah, so basically, I think it happens a lot in organizations and groups.
Yeah. Right. So the next one, JR, fourth one, something I relate to a lot because I find myself among, these six, perhaps this is what I find myself being toxic in that sense. So the fourth one is the lone wolf. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, lone wolves would be often actually very productive, but they're not really
Thank you.
team players.
Just kidding.
I find the team player naman. But they don't really like come up to communicate what's happening with their situation. So the tendency is for them also not to help other teammates. Their tendency would be like, that's not my job. That's not
Right.
part of my job description. So why would I do that? And then would have like very, very nice output, but super disjointed from the group's effort. So, so sa akin, walang kwenta yun eh. Kahit ang ganda pa ng part mo, but if it doesn't fit into the big picture, then it's not really that great. So.
I remember one specific situation about that. You're working on a project together for a competition, and you weren't hearing from this group mate a lot. And it turns out we were working on an application, and it turns out he already did everything. A two-man piece of
Oh my
work by
gosh.
himself. So really beasting, really doing a lot of work, quality work at that. But the consequence is his partner was actually doing the same thing as him. Something slightly different, but enough to cause confusion, enough to cause a disjoint between both of them. So they had to sort things out. And, while it was productive in the end, we got the job done. At that point in time, it was really toxic for both of them, even though they were productive. So it's kind of productive, but counterproductive as well.
Yeah. It could have saved a lot of time, them coming up with the best app.
Time,
had
effort,
they worked together.
Emotion, everything. So that's the lone wolf. Yeah. Number 5, we're second to the last. It's called, and I'm pretty sure we all resonate with this. It's called the emotional mess.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things happening now that could make a person emotional, but it would be good for us to look at some pattern. Later, I'm gonna say about that.
Yeah.
But this will be basically blaming the situation of the person or the work environment that makes the person not basically do the job.
Yeah.
The tendency would be hard to cope up with stress and would acquiesce and break down when things become difficult. So.
Yeah. I guess it's valid to acknowledge here that whatever the emotional mess is, these are valid. But it's also the toxicity comes when we don't recognize, perhaps, or like in a group setup when you just bring it, you don't allow your other members to understand it or to or you don't communicate it at them. Then that creates that aura of toxicity because it affects the whole team.
Correct.
So, right.
Yeah.
So.
And of course, there's a lot of situations in the online setup
Yeah.
of learning.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just a lot of like emotional stuff happening because
Yeah.
you guys don't actually see each other, and if you're
Yeah.
not able to communicate that, that's
Yeah.
gonna be very difficult.
So it's like a group member is breaking down, having a tough time, but you don't know
Yeah.
how to help because you don't know what that is.
Correct.
The
Yeah.
person's going
Correct.
through.
Yep.
All right. I guess it's pretty interesting, JR. This last definition or this last type is the longest of them all. I was trying to put that clear in my mind earlier. The 6th type of toxic teammate is the closed-minded know-it-all. TCMKIA. That's a very long definition. Imagine if you tell yourself you're at the
Such a Gen
closed-minded
Z.
know-it-all. But anyways, what's this, Jared? Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, even if there's 1,000 ways of doing a thing, for that person, there's only one best way,
Right.
and he or she is not gonna budge.
Right.
So it would be very, very difficult to work with that person because he or she's not gonna be open to any ideas, and that's also gonna cause a lot of relational difficulty, but also delays in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because when every decision, especially in a company, every decision would be equivalent to costs.
Right.
So, yeah, but for sure, some relational costs and other problems that would arise from the know-it-all. Yeah.
Yeah, this creates long meetings, just to share.
Oh yeah, for
when
sure.
you have someone
yeah.
just wanting to make his or her idea work without getting the input from others, it makes the meetings longer. It creates disgruntled teammates, and of course, you're not coming at the best solution. So it might have the consequence of having a substandard,
Right.
progress in reports, in quiz, not quizzes, in reports, in group works, even in projects together.
Yeah, and even if you're a very, very good student or leader, there could be times that you're mistaken.
Right,
And
for
not
sure.
being able to acknowledge that could cost your organization or your group a lot. So,
For sure. So those are the 6 types of toxic teammates.
how do you feel
Yeah.
about them?
Shocked. I mean, at the very least, I relate to some for sure. Resonate with some. I've seen this in my own organization. The people I interact, even people I talk to, just sharing their experiences. But JR, I think it's hard to label people as one of these, especially since these pop up mostly on a single time basis. So
Yeah.
you see that in a person once. But how do we use this information rather not just to label them
Right.
as
Yeah.
the closed-minded know-it-all or the slacker? Instead,
Correct.
use this to understand them and their situation even more.
Yeah, so I think it would be very dangerous to just like think of a name right away when we have these 6 types of toxic teammates. It would be good for us to look at our team members who we are suspecting that they're probably toxic and step back and say, is this just like one instance or
Right.
a repetitive pattern? If it's becoming a pattern of behavior, then it's worth finding out how to deal with that, which we're actually gonna discuss later on. But if it's just like one thing, then decide whether it's forgivable or you want to give the person a feedback.
Yeah.
But that's a different way to handle if it's just like a one-off thing. But
Right.
so look for patterns before labeling them as such. Okay. And then I think it's very important also for us to recognize that this could be you. As
For sure.
we were talking about
Mentioned.
that, and even the way I felt about this. And I think it's just good for us to acknowledge that if there's an impact on our organization or our group, then if it's us, then we should also handle this difficulty then all the more that we would also want to handle this difficulty with the other members.
Right.
So let's find out what would be important steps. What would be the important steps to dealing with our toxic teammates?
Let's get right into it.
So the first step for us, Aaron, to deal with toxic teammates would be actually to assume that everybody has good intent. Okay? So assume that this person has good intentions.
Right.
He or she does not mean to be toxic or a jerk in your organization
Sure.
or in your group. So I think it just coming from a perspective kasi na you can't really control the other person or manipulate the other person to change his or her behavior right away. But you can control yours. You can control your perception, your emotions about that. Yes, exactly. About how this person, how you're gonna respond. So having this assumption that everybody wants to be the best teammate naman, or everybody is here to actually make a contribution and wants to do well, then it puts you in a good disposition. Especially later on, we're gonna talk about it. Especially when you need to actually tell that person that there's a repetitive action or a behavior that's not helping you or the whole organization. So I think it's just a good principle and a good step. So assume assume muna na okay, maybe this person is behaving this way, and what could be the case why he or she is doing that?
Right.
Considering that this person wants to do well naman. Okay. Am I making sense?
Yeah, and just thinking about it, I wouldn't really say that no one wants to go into a group work to be a jerk or to be toxic in the first place.
Right.
So I was thinking about it. I've never been in that situation. Anyways, I guess that the same could be said from my peers, for those in group work situations. Nobody really wants to, be ineffective in the first place.
And even if they are being a jerk, or even if like they don't really want to be in that group or in that project that you guys are part of, at least when you think of that this person probably has good intentions naman.
Right.
It just helps you process yourself better. Your emotions, your reactions, and your thoughts. So, ayun, kaya mo i-control yun eh. That's in the circle of your influence.
Yeah.
So it's just easier for you and for your state to actually handle the situation when you're starting in that footing.
Right.
Which also helps you to recognize, like, I don't want to be the one who's toxic in this situation. I'm not gonna let this person transform me to becoming one just because I'm irritated or I'm just overly affected by him or her. So I think that would be very, very important.
So
But the second step, mindset. But the second step would be to communicate, actually. So assume that the person has good intention, and the second would be communicate. I think it's a disservice to that person if nobody talks to him or her about it, especially if he or she is not aware of the behavior. So, for example, before we get into, like, in your situation, typical situation, what would be a toxic trait or a toxic teammate be like?
Right. I think one of the most common for myself and for my other peers is in a group work situations, in group papers or group reports, where we'd have one or two teammates who are slackers right there. So they wouldn't really...
Sorry na.
I'm just kidding. But yeah, they wouldn't really contribute right up until the end where they'll show up at that point in time. All they have to do is just to submit the paper to the professor. I mean, the work's all done right there. So that's those kinds of situations. We're waiting for them to do their part. We're trying to figure out who has to take over that part, whether or not we should take over that part in the first place. So in that situation, we want to avoid being lone wolves ourselves, but because there's a slacker in the group, it's hard to deal with whether or not we should actually be the one to take over that responsibility without his or her knowledge.
Yeah. So before we communicate, so let's take this as a
exercise,
case study or exercise. So before we communicate to that person, it would be good for you to, yes, my tendency is to be a lone wolf and say like, you're not showing up, so I'm not gonna communicate to you guys. I'm just gonna like, buhat ko na lang to lahat.
Right.
That's not good for you. That's not good for your teammates or for your group mates. One is they're not learning, but also for you, for your sake, like it's gonna cost you a lot.
Added stress.
Oh, added stress and whatnot. Even if you have a good grade, to what expense, right?
Right.
So you don't want to be a lone wolf. So it would be good for you to say, or at least step back and recognize if this person has a good intention, what could be the reason why this behavior is persistent or this is becoming a pattern. So think about like, okay, hirap ba siya sa ibang subjects? Or meron ba siyang practical concerns or whatever? So it becomes a problem that could be solvable rather than ganyan talaga siya, hindi na magbabago yan.
Right.
I can't do anything about it, so whatever. If your conclusion right away is like, oh, he's just being a jerk, and that's his problem. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Could that happen? How could that transition? For example, you're in a team of 3, and then probably you have that already, that mindset, and your other teammate, probably doesn't have that mindset yet. Is it good to communicate that, hey, you should have the same mindset too?
Yeah, I think it would be good for you to look at the telltale signs of how it's affecting the whole group. So if people are now talking behind this person's back, like, oh, shish, ganyan talaga siya, such a, pabuhat talaga siya or slacker talaga siya.
Right.
I think it would be good for you as the leader to talk to your group mates and say, maybe we need to rethink about this and step back a bit and how we can actually help this person.
Right.
Share that mindset of like assuming a good intention. Then someone has to talk to the person. So it could be you as the leader or someone else, but definitely someone needs to communicate with the person. Okay?
Can I just say?
So let's go ahead,
Yeah, can I just say, communicating is the hardest part. You're actually telling that,
sure.
finding what we call tempo, or that right opportune moment to really just say that. It's hard.
Yep. Actually, the Harvard Business Review team also did a study and of like managers dealing with toxic employees. 67% of managers don't want to deal with hard conversations, telling their employees. I think that's also very true. It might actually be higher for Filipinos because we got some culture that's not argumentative, non-confrontational. So especially among younger students or younger leaders.
Where friendships
so they'd better,
are at stake.
Exactly, but they'd rather do the gossiping and talking behind the back of this person than to actually tell the person himself or herself. Okay, so how do we handle difficult conversations? Okay, are you ready for this? Because
Let's go.
this could be lethal for some. Anyway, one would be some principles, okay, for good communication or for difficult conversation, okay? One would be don't wing it. So have a plan on how you're gonna talk to this person. So the timing would be very important. So do a little bit of research. Kung ano yung pinagdadaanan ng member,
Person. Right.
ng person. So it would be good for you to have like a plan also of like, okay, this is my goal to talk to this person about this one. Because just in case emotions go up and down and become messy, that will be your ground.
Right.
Okay?
We're going back
So,
to this.
yeah. One resource for that would be Mel Robbins. I think she had a TED talk on how not to screw yourself. and then how to have tough conversations. So one principle is to plan for it. So have a vision and stick to that goal as much as possible. So, but it's important for you to communicate that goal as well. Like say, hey, I'm going to be talking to you about this one. I recognize that this could be a difficult conversation for both of us.
For both of us.
Yeah, so like this is not easy for me, but I think it would be good for us to talk about this.
Right.
Okay. Second principle is listen and ask questions. Okay. This is where empathic listening applies. Because sometimes you can be listening and then you're already formulating like
a solution.
Yeah, either like, oh, I know what your problem is. You just really need to do this, or in your mind it's like, oh yeah, she's
There's just
lying.
bias.
Yeah.
There's bias in your mind already.
Right. So like, shut out those like internal voice in your head. Listen to what the person is saying. Understand where he or she is coming from.
Right.
And then clarify, ask questions, validate. Before you can actually tell that person that he or she has a problem that that person is willing to listen to, he or she needs to feel that he or she was heard as well and safe.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Stephen Covey principle, seek first to understand, then to be understood. So basically, go and shut out that internal voice and don't judge.
Yeah.
And ask questions. Brene Brown gives us another principle in her Dare to Lead articles. And this one is about being clear and unclear. So being clear is being kind, and not being clear is unkind. So basically, you're not doing justice. You're not being fair. For example, you're gonna talk to this person. You're beating around the bush. The person has no clue at all what you're talking about. You're not specific at things, and then you're just afraid to speak up and be direct. So sometimes it's painful, but it's actually gonna give you much more peace later on when you're a lot more direct. Here, I think it would be very good or very important that to cite clear examples or specific situations and not just have a general statement like, yeah, you know, I have a problem with you because you're such a slacker.
That comes off wrong.
Don't do that. Don't do that. So what you can do actually, like, hey, I've noticed when we have like plans and then you have a certain assignment, it would take you X number of days or to reply or months to like show up, and then later on we have no idea, tapos hindi pala nagawa or di mo pala kayang gawin. So I think it would be good to really cite that very, very concrete example. And then come up with clarity also of the impact. Alam mo, pag ginagawa mo yan, ito yung effect sa amin.
Right.
So this is also how we feel about you or we think of you. And that has a serious impact on our results or how we work. So pag nag-continue to, this is what's gonna happen.
Right.
Okay? So clear action or behavior that you want to deal with. clear impact on how you guys are being affected, and then clear also consequence.
Right.
Like say, so if you continue to do this, we won't be able to trust you.
Very clear.
And,
Very, very
yeah.
straight to the point. Yeah, yeah.
Oo. So, paano ka namin maasahan kung ganito yung pattern mo of working? So, I think it would just be very, very important to have that clarity. And you're being kind to someone even if it's painful.
Right.
Okay? All right. And then, lastly, stick to the facts. Okay? So, I think this is very important principle. To just like, yeah, as I've said kanina,
Be clear.
ito, yung clarity, but hindi siya subjective. So look at the objective way of the situation. And so, halimbawa, ito yung assignment mo.
Right.
Tapos, these are the things that you were not able to do. And we had to divvy up the things that were supposed to be yours. This is what we did, and that gave us a lot more like work, and because of that. So again, just stick to the facts. Don't embellish and exaggerate.
Right. Yeah. I was gonna say that.
The clarity.
Like, be clear, but don't overblow it. Don't make it more than what it currently is, because you really can't solve something that's not there in the first place.
Sometimes kasi you're very clear naman na this is not good and we're not gonna trust you. But if you don't stick to the facts, emotions can get the most out of get over you, which is not good also.
For sure.
Okay, and then lastly, be vulnerable. So I think look at it as like not a blame game, but rather a contribution to the problem. So I think it would be good for you to acknowledge also that I might have contributed to this situation, because like we've been together for quite some time and I haven't talked to you about it only now. And so I think it would be good for us to have that kind of vulnerability, to also like say, identify with the person, like say, in my case, this is also my tendency. This could be a toxic behavior for me. And I'm here to understand where you're coming from. And I'm not here to like judge you and shut you out of our group. So I think it would be good for us to communicate that. And our hope is the person is going to respond accordingly.
Sure.
If not, then I think that's going to be a different conversation. We should have a different podcast for that.
Nevertheless, this is still our responsibility from the mindset to the action we want to take.
Correct. Yeah. Because if the person doesn't respond well to the communication, I think we really got conflicts there. So I think managing conflicts would be different from like, how do you deal with like a toxic teammate? Okay, so the third step, Aaron, is to grow together. Okay? So you can look at a problem of a toxic team member not necessarily like as a conclusion right away, but a journey that you can both discover. Okay?
Right.
So, of course, this happens in the communication stage, but definitely you're not going to have one conversation only if you really want to help the person or your team member grow. But it's also good for you because you're learning how to support and you're also growing in your capacity to lead people and not just like achieve results. So, because we know that if you're really a leader, you're going to care about your members, right?
For sure.
Yeah, so you know that quite well. So, you have to jump from or transfer or to get to from conclusion to curiosity. So that's where the journey starts. Okay, instead of saying, oh, this guy is just really a slacker, to like, okay, how do we
be what? How do we, get that out of that funk or get it out of that situation, or like being that kind of person or toxic teammate.
Yeah, especially if the teammate would decide na, oh nga, yeah, you're right. I need to change. I just don't know how to get from this place to a better one.
Right.
So then you have a journey together. So from conclusion to curiosity, it would be good for you to find out what are the ways to deal with his or her problem. And then there's another one that's called intentional change theory. It's formulated by an emotional intelligence expert in this field, psychology and theorist. His name is Richard Boyatzis. I'm probably butchering.
We'll send that in the
He's
show
a
notes.
Greek American, yeah. He's a Greek American theorist. Anyways, so it would be good for you, both of you, to agree on something, a common goal. So, for example, if the problem, Aaron, of your teammate is slacker or procrastination,
Right.
it's also your goal now. It's like, how can I support this person to be more maybe
Accountable.
prompt, accountable, or responsible? So then both of you are journeying together towards a common goal, because it's
Right.
also good for you to learn how to navigate your members and their different concerns. So that's one. So agree on your goal as a group or as a team, and then it would be good for you guys to identify action steps.
I like that word.
So for your teammate, okay, I need to communicate when I'm gonna be doing things.
Right.
And so for you naman, okay, so I need to remind you or to ask you for progress report when you said you're gonna do this on this date.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Then of course you build it from there. And then the last one is identify now the support that you can give to each other. So of course, I said already, the action steps themselves can be a form of support. But what else are needed? Because it's not just like a practical thing. Like you can't just like, it's not as if like you can just tell yourself like, all right, I'm not gonna be a slacker anymore, and then that's it.
Wishful thinking.
So there are exactly. So there are supports that need to be in place. So identify that, like say moral support. Or do you want me to talk to the other teammates to advocate, to be your advocate to them, especially if like saving face or shame is involved or whatnot. Or I mean, the guy doesn't have a decent laptop or data, so things like that. There would be, there would be help that you guys could probably do. But in any case, the theory, the intentional change theory gives you a way to look at a certain trait as now a journey to discover and a means of growth for both of you.
Yeah.
So basically, that's the third step. Yes,
Conclusion.
So instead of
curiosity.
Correct, exactly. Because a conclusion makes you think now you've already arrived, and then that's it. And you're not going to do anything about it anymore. Okay? So that's the third step. So just to recap, the first step is to assume good intent on your member. Second, communicate. So those are three things, but anyways, because it's a series of communication.
Right.
And then grow together. It would be good for you to think about those things in a specific period of time. Sometimes an organization or you only have a brief moment with this particular teammate. So of course you just really need to adjust, or whether like there's really a point to dealing with this person. You know what I mean. So.
For sure. You know, I like those three steps, how they're framed, because it shows clearly that it starts with yourself. Getting that mindset is key. Getting all the other members who don't have really, who are in a good place, if I may say that, to adopt that mindset as well. And then it translates to a concrete action, which, like you said, it's purposive, it's specific, it's factual kind of communication, even though it might be hard. But I think the most important that part is towards the end. After you do all of these things, there's still follow through, and I guess that's left out most of the time. But then again, even if it's left out, it's still something that we need to do, for ourselves as well, to be better leaders, but also for our teammates, for them to be better leaders in the future as well. So the responsibility devolves from being one that's localized to ourselves, and it extends to our other members and to that person that we're trying to help and we're trying to understand better.
Yep. So, one exercise maybe for you, for me, and for our friends, leaders out there. 6 types of toxic teammates. Which one could be you or yours? Okay? And then think about the impact of that. So if it's very close to home, then it would be good for you to really decide this is not something to be ignored and to be avoided. So therefore, it's important for me to go through the steps that we've laid out, the principles that we've laid out. But actually, those are very concrete things naman na you really have to do. So just don't be afraid of them.
Right.
And don't avoid that. So do those things necessary for you to handle and deal with that trait, because there could be one trait that's actually yours and someone has to do that for you as well. So assignment, think about those 6 traits and which one is yours. And if you already know, then maybe you can find a way how to deal with yourself and not be a toxic teammate.
Best of luck. I've been there. I'm still in that process, but I know, discussing all the principles today, there's hope. There's light at the end of the tunnel for all of us. It just takes understanding, communication, and follow through. So,
amazing. So don't be afraid of it. We can grow.
You got this. Woohoo!
Woohoo! So, the next time that you encounter toxic teammates, you don't have to avoid them. Instead, you can assume that they have good intentions, communicate very clearly and with empathy, and then decide to grow together. I hope that these steps will really help you and your organization.
So if you're looking to listen to more relevant topics, make sure to follow Ain't a Boss on YouTube, on Spotify, or wherever you may get your podcasts. Once again, my name's Aaron. With me is my co-anchor and friend JR. And this is Ain't a Boss, the only leadership podcast for highly stressed out students.